Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about 32 players today who it might be tough to predict their point totals, their goal totals, whether they're going to take a step up, maybe a step back. And also, I've got an NHL logo at the bottom here. I want to talk about something NHL related at the end of this as well. So, what I've done is I've done all 32 teams. It is not a random order. I started with Winnipeg and went backwards to Nashville, and then I alternated with starting with Anaheim, going all the way to Montreal. So, it's not as random as other videos, but I thought, well, I don't know that I've used that one before, and if I have, well, I'm using it again. So for Winnipeg, starting things off, I'm going with Gabriel Vilardi, who has made it clear it's Gabriel, not Gabe. 63 games played last year, 23 goals, 18 assists, 41 points. So I've got Vilardi on the board because he's brought in from LA. He's being used in first line minutes, and it feels like Vilardi has fit in quite well with the Jets during the preseason. We know that is not the regular season. Things may be different in the regular season, but it doesn't look like he's going to need a lot of time to adjust to playing on a new team. And in Winnipeg, Vilardi could be, I'm not going to say point per game, but he could be close. There are also those who are going to say, well, Vilardi can get overrated at times. So, yeah, Gabriel Vilardi, I think, is that wild card with the Winnipeg Jets. For Anaheim, I kind of think it has to be their holdout, Zegras. So Zegras last season plays 81 games, 23 goals, 42 assists, 65 points. And if you want to have a debate on the internet, just say out loud in a group of hockey fans in person or just anywhere on the internet, I think Zegras is one of the best forwards in the league, and you will have a debate immediately with hockey fans. But Zegras, the 65 points in 81 games, there are those who feel like, you know what, that's about where he's going to be, the 60 to 65 point range. And he's going to generate really exciting plays, but in general, his numbers aren't going to equal the exciting plays. And there are those who believe he's ready to break out and be a franchise level player. Now, the other wild card with this, of course, is he's currently not signed. He's not at camp, and it doesn't sound like there's anything pending on a contract. So when he does sign, if it takes a while and it's into the regular season, again, Zegras is a really tough one to predict. For Washington, so let me get his name on the board. All right, now you can start arguing. And then I'll explain. So Alex Ovechkin last year in 73 games, 42 goals, 33 assists, 75 points. However, he is 38. And Alex Ovechkin, at this point in time, will he get back to 50 goal range? There are those who will say yes, and there are those who are going to look at his age and say, at this point in time, his play has to drop off a little bit. Now, I debated about whether or not to put Backstrom up there, and there's an argument with Backstrom's numbers as well, but I feel like with Ovechkin's, that's what everybody's watching, right? That his chase of Gretzky, but do we see the goal scoring drop into the 35 goal range? Does he score 50 plus goals? I'm well aware that a lot of people have already picked their fantasy teams. Where did you see Ovechkin go? Did he go earlier than you expected? Did he go later than normal? Did he go right around where he usually does in any given season? Ovechkin's going to be an interesting one to watch in Washington. For Arizona, there were numerous ones I could have picked for Arizona. I thought about Zucker, but I'm going with Barrett Hayton. Hayton, 82 games last year, 19 goals, 24 assists, 43 points. And he had an excellent second half of the season. So then the question becomes, do we see that this year? Does he get into the 60 to 65 point range? Or does he end up in the 50 point range? Or is Hayden overrated? And halfway through this season, maybe he's not on that top line. Does that top line from last year that looked so good at the end of the season, does it have more of a struggle this year? So there's some question there with Hayden, but he was a top draft pick. I think Hayden's going to hit that 60 to 65 point range this year. But let me know your thoughts. For the Vegas Golden Knights, so they picked up Ivan Barbashev at the deadline, right? And after the deadline, I'm just including his numbers in Vegas. And there's a reason why. Because in Vegas, he plays 23 regular season games, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. And he was much better in Vegas than I thought he was in St. Louis the year before. So Vegas decides to keep Barbashev. They trade Riley Smith. I agree with that decision. I think that was a good decision. However, over a full 82-game schedule, does Barbashev end up producing at the 55-60 point range that 16 points in 23 games would tell you he should? Or do we see Barbashev's numbers drop into that 40-point range? So Barbashev's one that I'll be interested to see what happens with him with the Vegas Golden Knights. And honestly, coming off of a Stanley Cup win, I would expect Barbashev's numbers to be fantastic. But you never know. You never know until somebody's had that first full year there. And I mean that of any team, not just of the Vegas Golden Knights. So for Boston, I'm going with Pavel Zacha. Zacha last year in Boston, 82 games, 21 goals, 36 assists, 57 points. However, for Zacha now, he's being counted on to be a top center with the Boston Bruins. There's some pressure to that, and there's some debate about the upside with Zacha and whether or not he can get into that 65, 70 point range as well, or maybe higher, right? If he has good chemistry with Pastrnak, there's no reason he couldn't get near a point per game just via passing it to Pasta, who buries it, from the side of the net. Pastrnak very likely to hit 50 goals, I would think. I would think this year, after last year was fantastic for him. And Zacha may end up getting a lot of points there. So the other side of it is, what if Zacha struggles early and ends up being dropped off that line? Well, then his points totals would be affected as a result too. As we all debate just how far Boston could fall from that ridiculously good season they had last year. Next up is Vancouver. For Vancouver, I started writing the first name, so I got to get that off of there. Going with Höglander. So Höglander, not that long ago, and yet it feels like forever in Canuck years, I didn't feel like Höglander was going to get a chance from the Canucks to excel and to play. He only played 25 games last year, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points. However, since I've said that, there's been a total change in terms of who's running the team. We've had a change of who's the coach behind the bench. Höglander's had a good preseason on a team that hasn't had a good preseason, but I think Höglander's been solid. So Höglander might be one of those ones that, based on what the Canucks do, because they still might be looking to shed a contract or two along the way, right? There's been rumors about Garland, and Besser, and Myers, and various other contracts. But does Höglander end up getting a better chance? And again, we know he works hard. You get an honest shift out of him night after night after night. Every shift he tries his best. And I feel like that's more of a talk-it type player. I do. I feel like, so for Höglander, while a year ago I was like, I think he's probably going to have to go to another organization. Maybe the Canucks give him that opportunity this year. For Buffalo, I went with Levi. Who was 5-2, 905 save percentage for them. So Devin Levi may very well end up being one of the best rookie goaltenders this year in the National Hockey League. He might be the best rookie goaltender in the National Hockey League. However, then you get into the question of, and again, from a fantasy perspective, how many games does he win in Buffalo? Do you buy in that Buffalo is going to be a playoff team? Do you not? And with Levi being a rookie goaltender, we know with rookie goaltenders there can be those downbeats, and you can also have where teams figure out a weakness on a young goaltender, and it behooves that goaltender to fix that issue, whether it's a glove hand, whether it's a blocker, whether they have lateral motion issues, whatever it is. NHL teams figure this stuff out. And so Levi, I feel like there's going to be those who believe he's going to be a star right away, and then there's going to be those who look at Buffalo and say his numbers might be really rough because of Buffalo's defense, right? And whether or not Buffalo's defense is better on the whole than what it was last year. So I think with Levi, there's more debate there. For Toronto, this might seem odd, but this was my pick. Austin Matthews. So in 74 games last year, 40 goals, 45 assists, 85 points. Now, Matthews, the debate about where he stands amongst the best forwards in the game, well, we had that debate over the summer, didn't we? A couple of times, as I remember. But Austin Matthews, with 40 goals in 74 games, that was seen as kind of a down year for him. And he is a player who's proven he can score 60 in the NHL. Can he do it again? So for Matthews, are we at a stage now where we're going to see him as a consistent 40 to 45 goal scorer? Will he be a 55 goal scorer? Or, is he vastly overrated? Did he underperform last year? There's always a lot of debate with Matthews. But yeah, so I really think Matthews bounces back above that 50 goal mark, but we'll see. For Calgary, I went with Huberdeau. Because for Huberdeau, 79 games last year, 15 goals, 40 assists, 55 points. He already looks better in the preseason than he did last year. That is preseason. So again, once we get into the regular season, we'll find out where Huberdeau's at. But I do not see him scoring 55 points in Calgary. It's got to be in the 65 to 70 range at the lowest. If he can get above a point per game, if he can get to anywhere near as effective as he was in Florida that final year with the Panthers, we're going to be talking about the huge bounce back year for Huberdeau. And while the NHL doesn't have an official like bounce back comeback season trophy, I kind of feel like they should. You guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I think a bounce back trophy would be kind of a fun thing to have, or at the very least an award. I can have an award here on the bounce back candidates. But yeah, Huberdeau should be on that kind of a list. For Tampa Bay, I never thought I'd see the day Victor Hedman was on the list, but here we are. Victor Hedman, 76 games, 9 goals, 40 assists, 49 points last year. But he had 85 points the year before. He had 20 goals the year before. So for Victor Hedman, who clearly it seems has been surpassed as an offensive defenseman by Sergachev, does that continue this year, or do we see Hedman's totals get back into the 60-point range? Are we at a stage now with Hedman? He's played a lot of hockey. Are we at a stage now with Hedman where we're going to see his points totals drop off? And this past year was just the start, or does he have that bounce back? I still think Hedman's one of the best defensemen in the game. Again, we debated that this summer. But yeah, is he still going to be one of the best offensive defensemen in the game? Or are we going to see that points total drop off and then we talk about how solid he is defensively? Because Hedman's really quite good all around. So even if the offense does continue to drop off, it's not like he's not going to be a useful player for them. For Carolina, I went with Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi for the Carolina Hurricanes played 82 games last season, 18 goals, 25 assists, 43 points. He does get better every year. It just may not be at the rate that people want him to get better. They may want to see him get better a little bit quicker than he has. But yeah, Kotkaniemi honestly should be above 20 goals this season, should be above 50 points this season. Carolina continues to ease him along. That contract, the cap hit he has, though, might have some fans thinking, could you speed it up a little bit, right? So with Kotkaniemi, we'll see if this is the year that he hits his stride. But I thought he was good for them last year. Just again, when you look at that contract, he does underperform for the contract. For St. Louis, going with Robert Thomas here. So Robert Thomas, in the game I watched last night between St. Louis and Chicago, I thought he played well. And as I mentioned in that review, he was shooting the puck, which is something they've talked about. So 73 games last season, 18 goals, 47 assists, 65 points. If Thomas can start to, really live up to that contract, I feel bad for both Thomas and Kyrou, to be honest, because, they signed a contract with the team, and then they both had kind of rough years by comparison to what was expected of them. I think Thomas with 65 points in 73 games played well. I also think he can eclipse point per game status this year. I think he'll get above a point per game. I think 85 points is within reach. It's going to require his line mates to perform well. It's not going to be easy, but I do think that Thomas is capable of doing that for them. I think with Thomas and Kyrou, I think their contracts kicking in as the Blues might be going into a bit of a rebuild here. I think that might influence the opinions on their contracts too, but we'll see how it goes. For Chicago, I don't have any numbers to put up because he hasn't played in the NHL yet. It's one of 2 rookies. Connor Bedard. Because again, I've talked about Bedard, the points totals, and there is this incredible divide on what people think Bedard's going to be able to do this season and how many points he's going to be able to put up. And again, if you're playing fantasy hockey right now, that could be a big thing. If he ends up being a point per game player and you drafted him late, looks great. If he ends up scoring 55 to 60 points because Chicago can't score, well, that might negatively impact you if you took him early. I think Bedard's gonna be just fine. I don't have any concern about the team around him because I've watched as really good players have come into the league who are very, very hyped when they come in. And Bedard, the level of hype, I'm just thinking like we're talking Mario Lemieux, Eric Lindros, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin. When these guys have come in, They haven't had great teams. They haven't had necessarily great line mates out of the gate, but they've performed and produced pretty well. So I'm optimistic when it comes to Bedard. I do understand the trepidation some people have about predicting point totals for him, though. For Seattle, so in his second year, Matty Beniers, what does he do in his second year? Now, I do wonder, like, so 24 goals, 33 assists, 57 points in his rookie year in 80 games. Does Beniers take that next step this year, or do we see Beniers maybe fall back a little bit like Raymond did with Detroit last season? Beniers is a very good two-way forward, and so with Beniers and Seattle having a fantastic season, it's going to be tough to follow that up. It is not going to be easy for them to follow that season up and live up to the hype now. It's going to be interesting to see how they do, of course. But does Beniers see his points totals get up to the 65-70 point range? Is Beniers just going to be a very good two-way forward that never quite scores that point per game? Or, is he going to take off this year? So Beniers to me is the one that'll be interesting to watch. Colorado. So there's a couple of reasons for this name being on the board. Now, Valeri Nichushkin going into the playoffs, 17 goals, 30 assists, 47 points in 53 games. His points totals have been great in Colorado. The mystery surrounding him leaving the team during the playoffs, and some of that feeling like, how does he play this year? How do things go? Can Nichushkin stay at that around a point per game mark? So I think he can, but it'll be interesting to watch him because again, it was weird, wasn't it? It was bizarre. He's there and then he's gone, like Kaiser Soze, but so much weirder. So Nichushkin. 47, it's from the usual suspects. I'm really old. So anyways, 47 points in 53 games for Nichushkin last year, and we'll see how he does this coming season for Colorado. And if there's any other distractions, hopefully not, right? For San Jose, there's a lot of excitement around William Eklund. William Eklund, so coming back to Connor Bedard. Bedard, the comments are, well, he's not going to score that well because he's not going to have a great team around him or a very good team around him. His numbers will come up when it gets better. So Eklund had 2 goals and an assist for 3 points in 8 games with San Jose. Will it be the same thing with him then, where he's not going to be playing on a great team or with great line mates, so don't expect a lot? Or will Eklund have the talent to surpass whoever his line mates are, to surpass the San Jose Sharks' overall results and put up really good totals? So again, if you're playing on the fantasy side of things, that's the kind of gamble you're going to be making, is whether or not you think Eklund's going to hit and could hit, 25 goals, 50, 55, 60 points, or if you feel like, in San Jose, he might hit 35 or 40 that first year, and then you're just looking at that continual build. Because I've mentioned before, not every star forward comes in and produces right away. Some of them do, and then there's times too where a player will come in and plays really well in his rookie season and gets 55, 60 points, and that ends up being his career average, and what you see is what you get. So, again, we'll see where Eklund starts this year. For Columbus, another rookie. So, the favorites right now, Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, when it comes to rookies and the Calder race, which we haven't even technically started because we haven't played a regular season game yet. But what does Fantilli do for Columbus? He is seen as that franchise forward that they can build around. I don't know that I've ever seen Columbus have that franchise forward. And that's no offense to Rick Nash. Rick Nash, a very good goal scorer in his prime. But was he a franchise player? I would say no. That being said, Fantilli does project to be a franchise player. They were absolutely overjoyed that they were able to get him when they got him at third this year. And he's going to get every opportunity to succeed. But how many points does that translate to for him? Are you going to be looking at 50, 60? And the other question then becomes, since the Calder chase sometimes is somebody we don't expect, maybe somebody else ends up being ahead of them. So maybe it's Cooley with the Arizona Coyotes, right? I stick with Hayden. I go out with Hayden. I know people can be like, what about Logan Cooley? But otherwise, then it's just going to be a bunch of rookies. So Fantilli and Bedard were the 2 rookies I wanted to talk about in this video. For Pittsburgh, now Karlsson would be the obvious one, but I'm going with a less obvious option here. Brian Rust. So Brian Rust has had some very good, almost points per game seasons, and last year 20 goals, 26 assists, 46 points. Very good totals. Honestly, for what Rust provides, he's a good all-around player. But we've seen with seasons past that Rust can get on a hot streak. He can score at a very solid rate, and if Pittsburgh's going to have that bounce back here, and keeping in mind that they've added Karlsson, they may very well score a lot more. Does that affect Brian Rust's totals at the end of the season? Do we see Rust get back up to maybe he ends up in the 55, 60 point range? I still remember a tweet from Steve Dangle of who the hell's Brian Rust when Rust was performing very well and scoring a bunch. And I still think he has that potential. So for me, Rust is one of the... He may very well stay the same. Yep, he could stay at that same level. But since he's shown in the past what he can do, I thought, I'll throw Rust on the board. Dallas, I don't rust my boards. I don't think this is actual metal, so there's no chance of me rusting up my boards. For Dallas, I'm going with Jamie Benn. So Jamie Benn, to me it's obvious why Jamie Benn should be on the board, but I'll go into this. So Jamie Benn last year, under Pete DeBoer, 82 games, 33 goals, 45 assists, 78 points. Fantastic regular season. The playoffs, bit of a different story. Sure, yep, I will agree. Yep, okay, sure, yep. Yeah, he got suspended. Yeah, I know, and then when he came back, they lost. I know, I remember. But the 78 points in the 82 games is what I want to look at. The 33 goals. So Ben has this huge bounce-back season, and it kind of felt to me similar to in Vancouver when the Sedins had the bounce-back season after Tortorella was gone. So Willie Desjardins comes in, they're playing more of the style they want to play, and their numbers came back. And it felt like with Ben, we had something similar, that bounce back. And in the case of the Sedins in Vancouver, they weren't able to sustain that. Their numbers started to drop again. And it feels like with Ben, and he is on the older side in terms of National Hockey League players, it's going to be tough for him to equal that 78 points again. So for me, Ben's the one to keep an eye on with Dallas. Philadelphia, I'm going with a young guy for Philadelphia as well. Forster. Forster generated some excitement in his call-up. 8 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. So, a Philadelphia team that needs scoring. They've got Couturier back. They've got Atkinson back. If Forster hits, Philadelphia is going to be better than people expect. If Forster hits, I think Philadelphia is going to score more goals than people might be expecting. Because, again, Couturier is an excellent offensive player who also has really good defensive skill. Atkinson, we know he can score goals when he gets going. The questions about Atkinson with Tortorella are still going to be there, of course, because from Columbus and all that. But Forster, to me, is the one to keep an eye on with Philadelphia and whether or not he can make a go of it. I had thought about putting Frost on there as well. So I'll say this. Frost, I think he had 46 points last year. I think he's capable of more, but you guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. For Detroit, so are you a believer that DeBrincat in Ottawa underperformed as a goal scorer, or is that right around where he's going to be this year? Because for Detroit, I think they're really hoping for a return to that 40-goal form from Chicago. So 82 games last year for Ottawa, 27 goals, 39 assists, 66 points. DeBrincat's capable of more goals than that. I think the points total's right about where he ends up, but I do think 27 goals, I think he can hit 40. He has to have the right line mate. He has to have, he has to get on a hot streak here and there. But I do think DeBrincat can get back to 40-goal territory. Detroit paid a price, both in the trade and then the price of his contract to keep him. But yeah, we'll see how things go for DeBrincat this season. Getting to the third column. For Ottawa, so Ottawa's lineup's really kind of all over the place in terms of projection, because right now Pinto's out. Pinto, of course, they're trying to trade Matthew Joseph in all likelihood, and he's trying to just shut all that noise out. But Ridley Gregg, what role does he play this season? 20 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points for him last year. Do you put him in the AHL? Do you keep him at the NHL level? Does he play on the top 2 lines? Does he play on the third line? All questions that will lead to varying results when you're trying to project what kind of season he has. Greg has a lot of talent. I really like his work ethic a lot. I do think that if he's given a chance to play top minutes for Ottawa, I think he'll reward them. but does he end up playing those top minutes or not? I had thought about putting Giroux up there, but Giroux's been really consistent. So while he is on the older side, as I mentioned with Ovechkin previously, and I mentioned with Ben here, I don't feel like there's as much of a danger that Giroux drops off because a lot of Giroux's points are helpers, and he's got a lot of chemistry, which is why Pavelski's not on this list either. For Edmonton, Edmonton was kind of easy. Talked earlier in the summer about players that I thought would have a hard time matching their totals from this past season. In this coming season, and Nugent Hopkins to me is the obvious one. 82 games, 37 goals, 67 assists, 104 points. The points are great, and Nugent Hopkins is a really solid forward who's come into his own over the last few years. However, if the Oilers are going to win, they need to have three scoring lines. As ideally, McDavid centers line 1, Draisaitl centers line 2, Nugent Hopkins centers line 3, and you drive the rest of the West completely bonkers. So that's what you're hoping for. And then you're hoping to have 6 wingers who can produce. 6 guys who can produce. That's why Connor Brown's going to get every opportunity to succeed. And I thought about putting Brown on the board, and I thought, Nugent Hopkins is going to be an interesting one. Is he a point per game player? If he's on the third line, probably not. Maybe he falls down into like 60, 65 point territory, which for a third line center is fantastic. And then, of course, the power play is going to come into question, too. They had the best power play, arguably, in NHL history. Statistically, it was, although it's only been tracked since, I think it's, 1979 or 78, somewhere in that range. And so it's hard to argue the best power play of all time when we don't have the numbers going back all time. But Nugent Hopkins definitely benefited from that, as most of the Oilers did. So if that power play drops off a bit, maybe Nugent Hopkins isn't on that first unit, because, again, they've changed out some of their personnel. Be interesting to see what ends up happening. For the New York Rangers, it feels like every year I talk about Kaapo Kakko and whether or not he's going to take off. It's the annual storyline. Oh, look at that! I was going to take away 2 games he played. I'm not going to do that. I promise. Played all 82 games last year, and on the kid line, 18 goals, 22 assists, 40 points. Looked excellent in the game I watched the other night between the Rangers and the Islanders. He was the first star. I think Kakko, again, I think it's partly, I think, a confidence issue. I also think it's just getting that opportunity. If the Rangers give him an opportunity, I do think Kakko has another gear. And I think 18 goals and 40 points, respectable on its own. If you take away the fact he's a number 2 draft pick and you just look at it on the surface, Kakko's put up respectable totals. But again, the expectation being higher because of where he was drafted. I do think Kakko's capable of hitting 55 points this year, 25 goals. Sure, why not? I think he can absolutely do it. I think that kid line is fantastic. Heedle's out right now, but again, we're not up to the regular season yet, so you don't really need to worry about it at this point. Florida, I'm going with a player who is hurt, Brandon Montour. And there's a reason for Montour being on the board outside of just the injury and how he's going to look when he comes back from that. So in 80 games last year, Montour scored 16 goals, 57 assists, 73 points. That is like the definition of a career season. Montour has never really shown that kind of offensive acumen at the NHL level. So I don't expect Montour, when he returns from injury, to score at that rate. And then there's the matter of when he returns from injury, how effective is he? And how long does it take for him to really get back into the swing of things? Is it right away, or does it take a little while? So Montour is the one, I think, to keep an eye on in terms of the point totals. Absolutely great year last year. It's going to be really hard to follow that up. And again, starting on the injured reserve doesn't help either. For the New York Islanders, wouldn't be an Islanders 32 teams offseason if I don't mention Barzal at some point. I don't think I've mentioned Barzal yet this summer, but hey, summer's over. There's some people browsing the channel right now who may not have browsed the channel much during the summer because they got stuff to do. 58 games for Barzal last year, 14 goals, 37 assists, 51 points. There are screams of him being overrated by some. My answer to that is that if the Islanders ever decide, he's overrated, we can pitch him. I would love to see him on any team I cheer for. Barzal, if the Islanders really leaned into the offensive side of things, I think they have a lot of solid offensive options there. Horvat is right there. Brock Nelson's fantastic around the net. and I think Barzal's numbers would come up as well. The problem is your defensive numbers would suffer as a result too if you're playing that all-out offensively minded game. So Barzal, I do feel like gets underrated a bit. Is this a year where we see the Islanders looking to score more? Do Barzal's totals improve? They will if they decide to open things up offensively and if they can really get things clicking. For the LA Kings, coming over from Ottawa, Talbot. Cam Talbot last year, 17, 14, and 2, 898 save percentage. So the question with Talbot then becomes too, like, do you believe he's going to be the starter? Is it a 1A, 1B situation? So will he play 40 games? Will he play 50 to 55 games? Can he stay healthy? How many of those games is he going to win? Are the Kings going to be a top team? A lot of question marks. Talbot's numbers, the 898 save percentage was rough. But again, as I've mentioned before, the advanced stats would tell you he was pretty good. Just the Ottawa defense in front of him was kind of brutal. So Talbot will get a chance behind a much better defense in LA to show he's still got it. He's still a starter. But then you've got Phoenix Copley's right there too. And Copley showed last year, while his numbers weren't fantastic, that his win-loss record was. So for Todd McClellan, he's got an interesting, I don't know if it's a dilemma, but it's a dilemma that I think coaches would be happy with, that you have two goaltenders who could potentially be your starter. So is it going to be a 1A, 1B? They alternate starts. Does Talbot win the job outright? Or does David Riddick end up being the backup? And again, that's a 3-goalie situation to look at. So for Tampa fans watching this, don't panic. There's some teams with 3 goaltenders, and you're going to have to waive a goaltender because you don't generally carry 3 goaltenders unless you're Carolina. I think Carolina's the only one I can think of that's likely to carry 3 goaltenders to start the season. For New Jersey, Tyler Toffoli out of Calgary. So for Tyler Toffoli, last year in Calgary, 82 games, 34 goals, 39 assists, 73 points. I don't think anybody will argue that he wasn't the best forward for the Calgary Flames last year, but can he do it again? And in New Jersey, where he's going to be one of a lot of offensive weapons New Jersey has, will his goal totals and his points totals drop? Just because there are so many options they're going to have, right? You've got Hughes, Heischer, you've got Meyer, you've got Mercer. There are a lot of options there. So that will, I think, negatively impact Toffoli's numbers overall. He may have just as solid of a season for them, but it just may be there's only one puck that can be scored at a time, and there's a lot of players who can put the puck in the net in New Jersey, which is why they were able to move on from Tatar. You bring in Toffoli, you move on from Tatar, and so yeah, we'll see how things go for Toffoli this year in New Jersey. For Minnesota, has to be Gustafsson, because Gustafsson, it could be argued, had a career year last year. 22, 9, and 7 record, 931 save percentage. So he didn't play a ton of games either. So if he ends up being the unquestioned starter, let's just say that Marc-Andre Fleury has a rough start again. And Marc-Andre Fleury's had a rough start to the season. I'm pretty sure he had a rough start for Minnesota. I know he had a rough start for Chicago the previous year as well. So if Gustafsson's counted on to play 55 games, 60 games, is he going to be able to do that at the NHL level and maintain those kinds of numbers? Or does Fleury have a big bounce-back season, and that could negatively impact Gustafsson's numbers overall because he's not going to play as often if Fleury looks like he's good to go? Then we get to Nashville. Nashville, another rookie on the board here. At least I believe Evangelista still qualifies as a rookie, or does he? He played 24 games 24 games last year. He may not qualify as a rookie. I don't think he does. Just thinking it through in my head. 24 games, 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points. And I think he played games prior to last season. So, yeah, he would not qualify as a rookie if that's the case. But Evangelista, on a team that's going to need goal scorers, right? They've bought out Duchesne. They traded Johansson. So there's room down the middle. But Evangelista, as a forward in general, how many points does he score on a team that's going to need more goal scorers and more points? So Evangelista is going to be one to keep an eye on. I debated about whether or not to include Ryan O'Reilly on the board. But again, O'Reilly coming out of Toronto and at this point probably declining offensively in general. Evangelista is one to watch as a young player who could snag a job in the top 6 and could score a ton of points. depending on how many goals Nashville's able to throw in the net. For Montreal, to close things out from the team perspective, I went with Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki, 82 games, 26 goals, 40 assists last season for 66 points. And this absolutely could have fit into, I don't think the heavily debated, I included Suzuki, I think it was Caulfield for that. But Suzuki, I love Nick Suzuki's game. 66 points is good. I think he's capable of a point per game. Now, the thing with Suzuki is, what's tied to that is that he has to be playing with Caulfield, and they have to have that full schedule together. And I think if they play a full 82-game schedule together, we're going to see Suzuki's assist totals balloon. I think he could get to 60 assists, and I think he could get into the 90-point range. So Nick Suzuki's numbers will likely be tied to Caulfield's. But there's one other thing to keep in mind. So I wanted to put this on the board because over the last few years, we've seen the scoring trend in the NHL trend in the positive, where it's been more offense, more offense, more offense. Does that continue this season? Do we see the scoring continue to go up? Or are we going to see it flatline, where it's well, flatline's the wrong terminology. Are we going to see it on a straight line, or will we see it drop? Not flatline, because flatline is just, there's no offense, we're back to dead puck. No, I'm just going to say no. I never want a return of the dead puck era. But do we see the offense continue to grow? Do we see teams making the defensive adjustments, and then we see the scoring drop as a result? So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out whose numbers are going to go up, whose are going to go down, is that league-wide trend, which has seen the scoring come up, which is why now a player can score 60, 70 points and kind of fly under the radar. Whereas 15 years ago, you put up 70 points, you're one of the better scoring forwards in the game. So we'll see how things go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.